I'm gonna go ahead and meeting to order at 9:04 on August 5th. If we can go ahead and do introductions around the room.
John Rosa, IMPO.
Kristen Sanchez, NPO. Jochi Martin, NPO. Will draft. Andrew Miller, NPO. And David, NPO. And the other writers.
Neil Mantry, City of Carmel.
Rob Whitlock, County Cleveland. Michael Pierce, City of Westwood.
Ellie Krupp, City of Noblesville.
Brad Davis, Hamilton County. Mike Morowski, Boone County. George Lewis, Town of Idaho.
Renee Radcliffe, City of Lawrence.
Matt McIlroy, City of Franklin.
Paul Pioni, City of Greenwood.
Chicago, City of Detroit.
Scott Singleton, Town of Plainfield. Daniel Johnson, Johnson County. St. John, City of Indianapolis.
Steve Moore,
Glenn Morris, City of Greenfield.
City of Greenfield.
Davis, Oregon, City. Tony Hinkle, WSP.
Yeah.
Mark Beck, Crossroad. Brian Holcomb, Lockmiller.
Julia Server, PS Engineering. Stacy Connor, PS Engineering.
Greg Budd, TQ.
Robert Norder, Jake Wall.
Okay, thank you. First item on the agenda is the meeting minutes from April 1st. And if everybody had the opportunity to review them, in addition or correction.
Make a motion for approval, Renee.
A motion by Renee, a second for Ron Wilhite. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carried. Meeting minutes from June 17th. This is the joint committee. This will go both before tech and policy before full approval. Any additions or corrections that need to be noted on these meeting minutes? This is an item for approval.
Make the motion for approval, Renee, City of Lawrence.
Okay. Second by Ryan Wilhite. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carries. Agenda item number 4 is the Circle Metropolitan Transportation Plan Amendment number 4. No.
So we have several projects in this MTP4 amendment, several that are new projects and some that are updating in Johnson County, Hendricks County, and Greenwood and Morgan County. So mostly we've made revisions to existing projects due to funding changes or time period changes. Projects that have been split into phases. So to distinguish funded portions, that like as opposed to future unfunded segments. So we've broken up existing projects based on their time changes in funding, and then new projects that are being added to the MTP. That's kind of all. Is there anything on it?
Any questions? Okay, this is an item for approval.
Make a motion for approval, Mike Morowski.
And by Mike.
Second, be fine.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carried. We have Laura for the 2026-29 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment.
Hello, everybody. My name is Laura. I'm with the TIP section, and I'm presenting the Q3 TIP amendments for you today. Just a reminder, today we have both exempt and non-exempt amendments, so you'll see two resolutions for one for exempt and one for non-exempt. These amendments are going to public review and comment on August 8th through the 17th. We'll have two virtual hearings on the 17th on Monday, and then we'll have an in-person public hearing on the 19th at the policy meeting. So for the exempt amendments, we had 9 total exempt amendments submitted to us this quarter. 6 were new projects added to the TIP, and 3 were revised projects due to added phases or revised funding amounts. And then we only had 1 local exempt amendment this quarter. And that was just a revision to the project. Any questions about those exempt amendments this quarter? No? Okay, I'll pause for the resolution.
Okay. Awesome. So this is resolution 2026 IMPO 009. Can I get a motion for approval?
So move. Thank you.
The motion by Mark and John, second. Ryan will hire. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the non-exempt amendments. We had a total of 6 non-exempt amendments this quarter, 2 of which were new projects added to the TIP, which were new signal installation projects, and then 4 were just revised projects due to added phases or changing in the fiscal years, which were just now amended to the MTP. Any questions about the non-exempt amendments in your packet? No? Okay, I'll pause for the resolution.
Is it not even in the room to answer questions? Okay, that's good. Okay. There's an item for approval.
Make motion to approve. Scott, kind of like this.
A motion by Scott Singleton. Second. Okay. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carried.
Great. We also wanted to give you an update on the call for projects. As many of you know, the federal funds exchange program isn't being extended. So we had to kind of move forward with the earlier call for projects this year. This is for state fiscal year 2030 and 31. The call for projects is going to open on August 31st, and the applications will be due on October 2nd. So a bit of a turnaround time. We are finalizing a call for projects packet for you. So that should be coming out to you in the next day or so via email and on the TIP website. And then we are going to be using the existing selection criteria for the IMPO. As many of you know, we've been working with a consultant, High Street, and our selection criteria subcommittee to revise that funding. But due to the exchange program being not extended, a short time period, and some delays with High Street, we're going to be using the existing selection criteria, hopefully to use the new criteria into 2027. And then finally, just a reminder that because this is not going to be under exchange, we're going to be returning to the federal program for this call for projects. So just keep that in mind as you submit your applications in terms of scope and timeline. And we would encourage you to try and get your applications in as early as you possibly can. On this next slide, we have information about the funding availability. So we will have quite a bit more in this call for projects. So we're anticipating that there might be more applications. So the sooner that you can get them in, we can get them to our consultant HNTB, who does the cost estimates for us. So the quicker they can review those and get them back to us, the faster that we can start ranking and scoring the projects, and just move the process along faster. We will have about 98.9 million in STBG, about 15.3 in HSIP, and about 43.5 million in CMAC. So that's a little bit shy of 158 million. You'll note that TA is not listed on here, and that's because in our last call for projects, we did already award and program out TA for 2030 and 31. But that doesn't mean that you can't submit bike and pedestrian projects as call for projects. That just means that the funding will most likely come from STPG for those types of projects. Any questions about any of these updates? Yeah.
With the two fiscal years being covered, do you get a slack what fiscal year you want your project funded in?
I believe we're trying to keep it in 2030. Is that correct, Kristen?
Yeah, we're targeting just with the tight turn. We want projects that are ready to go in 2030. And then just based off of what we get, we'll reach out probably when we have the final list and determining which ones go in which year. But we just want to make sure that all projects are ready to go in 2030, anticipating some will slip. Just so we don't, this will be back under NDOT's annual allocation policy. So we don't have the flexibility for projects to slip.
And that annual allocation policy is that if you don't use any of the funds, we lose out on the funds. Any other questions about the call for projects? No. Well, if you do have questions, reach out to me or Kristen. We'd be happy to answer them for you. And again, we'll be sending out that packet about the call for projects here in the next day or so. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we have Andrea, who is going to talk about the safety action plan. She covered this in a previous meeting. Since that time, we've had some public engagement and just a high level overview.
Yes, thank you, Anna. Good morning, everyone. So as was just stated, you got a much longer presentation at the June joint meeting. But since this is an item for adoption, we wanted to give you just a high level overview, just make sure everyone's comfortable with what's in this document and provide you with a few quick other updates. So just general items, I wanted to make sure everyone's aware. We did do a full update to the regional high injury network. So if that's something that you have been looking at in our previous safety action plan, there will be a new one once this is fully adopted. Other items include identification of community safety zones. So for communities that do not have their own safety action plan, these are areas within your jurisdiction that are areas that need special attention. So think of it almost as like a local high injury network. So we recognize that for many of our communities, they weren't represented on the regional, or maybe they just had like one small spot. And so this is intended to just provide our members with a starting point if you don't already have one. So those are located in the appendix of this document. If you haven't reviewed them, please do. The other item I wanted to make sure everyone knew about was the inclusion of the new vulnerable road user assessment. So this just provides additional information regarding pedestrians and bicyclists. And that is also in the full safety action plan. Two items I want to just make sure that everyone's fully aware of. So we are updating the tracking methodology used for our Vision Zero goal. So I do want to just quickly revise. In a previous meeting, we talked about updating the Vision Zero resolution, but since we are changing just the tracking and not the goal of a 35% reduction by the year 2040, we do not need to update the full Vision Zero resolution. So I just want to make everyone aware of this change in tracking methodology because you will see it moving forward in our annual safety report. So notably, this will use a 5-year rolling average. So every year I come up and I say, oh, it's, our fatal and serious crashes, they're up a bit, they're down a bit, they're up a bit, they're down a bit. This will provide a better trend line so we can get a clearer idea of what's going on. And the other item it'll update is to update the baseline to the year 2023 because of the change that we experienced in the data from ARIES. So we used to use incapacitating crashes as our serious crashes. And in 2023, well, there was a few years it was slowly being phased in. Now it is suspected serious injury. And so this will just allow us to all all jurisdictions to be using that SSI definition. And so we also updated that baseline year, but the end goal in 2040 remains the same. The other item I wanted to just make sure that everyone was aware of is that the project scoring criteria and project list that's included in the safety action plan. So previously, we asked you all to submit projects that we could include in our safety action plan. It's a required component. And we have updated that to include a 5-factor methodology. So you all will no longer be submitting projects. It includes 5 factors. Is the project located in part of a safety zone, those community safety zones? Is the project location in the highest priority safety zone? Is the project in a location with severe crash history? Is the project part of the regional HIN? Is the project part of a past IMPO safety audit? So both of these items, both this one and the updated Vision Zero resolution, were items that we vetted with the Safety Steering Committee, and everyone seemed to be in pretty unanimous agreement on these. Few quick updates on our public comment period. So this was open from July 8th through July 22nd. We got 2 public comments. One was a requested clarification on findings, which was provided, and the text was just updated to make it a little bit more clear to people. And then we also received a public comment emphasizing the need for increased investments into projects that improve safety. So the general gist of the comment was like, hey, this is great work. What are we doing to really make sure that we are targeting this money? They also stated a desire for a more ambitious Vision Zero goal. So we have a 35% reduction by 2040, and they expressed a desire for greater than that. And then there are some additional edits by staff just to revise typos, improve graphics, and eliminate mention of older plans and documents. So we do have a full comment log if you are interested in that. But we did not include that in the packets. Please feel free to ask me for that if it is of interest to you. And as far as remaining SS4A grant work, so the safety action plan is obviously a big part of our SS4A grant, but we do have a few other activities that are being funded through it. So I just wanted to give you a status update on those. The road safety audit findings were finalized since packets went out. So if you read the memo, it'll say, those road safety audits are coming soon. They are done. So you should have received those if you were one of the communities where we had a road safety audit. If you haven't, please email myself or Jennifer Dunn. Other items, we have a 2026 safety summit that we are planning. It's intended to provide education to the public on improving traffic safety. So we do officially have a date at this point. It'll be September 15th, and we will be sending more information to you as we have it available. And then the last item is an ArcGIS story map for the safety action plan. So we recognize that this is a really big document. It has a lot going on in it. And so the goal of the story map is to help guide people through some of the most critical elements of the safety action plan. I think it'll also be of interest to our members because I do recognize that our safety action plan is quite large. But that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions on this?
This is an item for approval.
Motion for approval for LP.
Motion by Mike, second.
Second.
Okay, Lawrence. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carries. Congratulations, Andrea. I feel like it's been a long process from going after the grant to
Thank you. Yeah.
getting within the docket. Look, technically, you got 1 more in 2 weeks.
Yeah. All right, very different change of topic. So now I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the maximizing the value of land study. So this is a housing related study. Very briefly, before I go into the findings of our new study, I just want to provide a very quick recap of what we've done in housing so far and why we're talking to you about this. So housing has become a subject of increasing interest for MPOs across the country. So we're seeing more and more MPOs really talk about the link between land use, housing, and supporting regional mobility. As you all are fully aware, obviously, we are administering these federal transportation funds, and the land use patterns that are involved in that, how our roads are built out, are all a part of this. And so that's why housing has become this increasing topic. So we are seeing that in federal transportation policy, and funding is increasingly recognizing the connection. So we're seeing FHWA host these peer exchanges talking about like, hey, we want you to be explicit. We want you to highlight this connection. And then we're also seeing in more recent bills, for example, if you've been keeping up to date with the Road to Housing Act, they do include MPOs as an eligible entity to go after funding for grants. So in general, we're just seeing this movement. And in 2024, actually, the IMPO completed its first housing-related study. So that was a Central Indiana housing study. And as the name really implies, it was just intended to provide a regional understanding of what's happening in housing across our region. So it looked at things like housing prices, housing availability, how housing types compared to what the population wanted and can afford. It proposed policy solutions for identified issues, and it also investigated the impacts of corporate investments into our communities. And there were there were quite a few findings. I do encourage you to look at the document if that interests you, but there's one in particular that I want to highlight, which is rising unaffordability, but specifically the contributing factors to it. So market forces are a large contributor. I don't want to gloss that over. So things like interest rates, for example, or the cost of materials do have a large impact on the cost of housing. But one of the items that we identified in this study is that there was also a mismatch in the housing market stock compared to their preferences. So specifically, the region does not have enough smaller ownership units, and the region had relatively more mid and higher cost 3 and 4+ bedroom houses than people would prefer. And when I say that, I want to be very careful. These houses are absolutely being bought. They are being rented. They are being used. But really what we saw is there's a significant portion of the population that wanted those smaller ownership options. And instead, all they could find was some of the larger houses. And if the preferences are there, really the lack of housing is not an accident. It's the result of policy decisions we've made. So this goes into our zoning ordinances, among other items. And this is an issue that's actually pretty common across the US, referred to as missing middle housing. And that's just housing options that fall between single family homes on medium-sized lots in these large apartment complexes. So all the options that come in between, you will see these in certain areas of the country, but there were quite a few decades in between where we just did not build them. So things like cottage courts, things like quads, things like small scale apartment complexes that are like less than 20 units that are more useful for infill. And these do a variety of things. They help with affordability. They also help people stay within a single community at different stages of their life. So if you think about what a recent college grad needs is not what a growing family needs, is not what empty nesters need in terms of their housing. So we identified this as an issue, but the Central Indiana Housing Study really framed this as an affordability problem. And one item that the study did not make clear is that this is also a municipal budgeting issue. And that's the focus of the Maximizing the Value of Land study that we've just completed. So what do I mean when I say this is a municipal budgeting issue? Obviously, within a community, you have your revenues, primarily property and income tax here in Indiana. And then you have the expenses associated with those households, right? You have police, fire, parks, and your streets. And in a healthy community, they need to be pretty much roughly on balance. So the question that the MVL was trying to address is, how do different housing types affect municipal budgets? And another way to phrase this
is how do different housing types affect our ability to provide services and a high quality of life for our residents? Again, thinking of all the infrastructure that you have to continue to fund and keeping it in good repair. Things like our parks, things like fire and police. And so for this study, we looked at 10 different housing types of both rental and ownership and varying in density. And we looked at what was the balance between revenues and expenses when you were averaging these across their land use. And the key takeaways, one of the big ones was that higher density development is fiscally beneficial compared to lower density. There's often this perception that because you have more people in a smaller area, that it's going to be like a more intense use and actually cost more. But for a few different reasons, we found that that perception is not accurate. The first is probably one of the more obvious ones. It generates more property tax revenues and income tax revenue per acre, right? That one's pretty self-explanatory, but there were some other items as well. So it does make more efficient use of public infrastructure like your streets and water, sewer, stormwater mains. If you think about needing to service a development that's stretched out over many acres versus serving a development that is the same amount of people, it's located in a smaller area. There is an associated cost with obviously just stretching out those roads and streets. And so for that reason, we found it was also more efficient use. And we also found that it reduces the service area that needs to be covered by emergency services. So emergency services are more sensitive to population growth versus geographic growth than, for example, our roads and sidewalks. But there's still an associated cost saving. So for example, if you think about maybe this means that instead of building a whole new fire station in an area of your community that's now developing, maybe it looks like adding an extra fire truck or just expanding onto an existing one. And so those are the types of items that we talked about. And we also found that rental housing is fiscally beneficial compared to owner-occupied housing for the simple reason that owner-occupied housing pay lower property taxes because of deductions and caps. So I know this is a little bit hard to see. This is a full chart. So we took 3 case study municipalities and we did an assessment with their budget on all these different housing types. And again, we found these, the findings were consistent across the different cities and towns. One other item that we did include that I want to highlight, we did do a school district analysis because we recognize that this is really important for the health of our communities. It's frequently a draw for people who are moving in. How are the school districts within your area? And so we wanted to account for that when we were looking at this subject. But we did find it was essentially the same. Rental housing is more beneficial, fiscally beneficial. Higher density rental housing will be the most fiscally beneficial for many of the same reasons that I already talked about, but also because there are actually fewer school-age children in renter-occupied households than in owner-occupied. So that was something that we confirmed using census data for our region. So this is an important conversation at any point, but I do think there's, we do kind of have to address the elephant in the room, which is Senate Enrolled Act number 1. So this act will be steadily phased in over the coming years, and it's projected to significantly impact local government revenues by increasing homestead property deductions and providing new property tax credits, and by placing caps on year-over-year increases in the local property tax levy. And the analysis that we performed in this estimates a 30% reduction in total revenues for ownership housing types and a 23% reduction in total revenues for rental housing across all municipalities. And for all municipalities involved, this resulted in a drop below minimum fund balance and just a steady depletion of funds in general. Obviously, there are a lot of different potential options that can be picked up to address this. You could look like increasing local income tax. It might look like targeted service reductions. It might look like raising revenue in other places. I'm sure that's a conversation you're having internally. But one item I do want to highlight is that housing types that provide the greatest fiscal benefits now continue to do so under SEA 1 because the general structure doesn't change. It just basically reduces your revenues. And so I'm not saying that you should just build, large scale apartment complexes everywhere across your community. But I do urge you to think about this as you are expanding your community, thinking about the long-term fiscal sustainability as you expand. Other items from the study, so I'm not going to go into detail on them. I just want to make you aware. We do have site-specific case studies. We did an infill site, a greenfield development site, and a TIF district to see how those compared. And we also did a quality of place analysis. So we often will hear from people around the region like that they desire certain amenities. And this was intended to just be like, okay, you do need to have a certain number of people in an area to support those amenities, or they're just not going to survive. And so that was the goal of the quality of place analysis. So this was a very quick overview of the study. I do have a somewhat longer presentation, and this is something that I am sharing and presenting to different groups across the region. So if you're interested in either talking one-on-one more about this, or if you're interested in having me present to staff or an organization, I am available for that. So yes, happy to sit down and talk with any one of you, but are there any questions right now? Okay, well, you all know where to find me. So with that, I will turn it back over.
Thank you, Andrea. I do want to iterate, Andrew's worked hard on this project, has presented to the Greenwood City Council a few weeks ago as part of their learning series. We are talking to the planning roundtable group about it, but if you the planning commission board, they have that understand you are engineers and focus mostly on roads, right? There is this infrastructure, housing, land use, like chicken, egg type of thing. And so thought it was good just to share some of the high level findings, insights. Wanted to thank, and Andrea, you're gonna have to help me with that, but there were 3 specific case studies, communities, LPAs helped provide additional information for those case studies. Greenwood, okay, Noblesville, and McCourtsville. Okay, so just want to say thank you to all 3 of those communities because they did have to provide infrastructure costs and information for the consultants of Andrea to get some of the financial analysis correct. So I think that really parlays us pretty well. Not in certification, but I'm going to hit the strategic plan real quick. We have been over the course of the last year working on the IMPO strategic plan. We've done surveys of tech policy and the executive committee. We have done stakeholder interviews of not only membership, but external partners. We did a site visit with several of the executive committee members, and really still, I'm going to say, focusing on several themes of the IMPO strategic plan. I will argue, so our first strategic plan in my mind was very clear, and it was, right, codify ourselves as an independent organization, separate from the city of Indianapolis and expand into other areas. Very easy to articulate 3 bullet points. Right, we've done that. We are a separate governmental entity. While we are still renting space from the city of Indianapolis, we are entangled for the most part. This one is just simply not as clear. I think we're just more in that growth strategy and trying to be responsive to member needs. You know, since that time, there's also a new regional governmental organization, the RDA, the Regional Development Authority. But we still really are coalescing on, right, like we are not going to forget transportation is the core function of what the IMPO does, right? So transportation leadership, continuing to push, evolve, bring more money back. Federal planning leadership, right, following what's happening on the federal level, September 30th, transportation bill expires, right, like all following that, as that evolves, we will be as reactive as we can, under the current administration, right? Internal operations is a theme, continuing to make sure the organization runs smoothly, but housing and land use are both mentioned in the current transportation bill, and then recently there's a new housing bill that has passed that actually funnels money to MPO for additional housing analysis. So land use, housing, innovation as technology evolves, and then just continuing to be that regional technical data background organization that is pushing data to your communities so you understand, we understand land use patterns, population patterns, travel patterns, all of the things that make our central Indiana region work and be an economic engine. So just a high level, we're going to bring that in October for approval. If there's anything I said today, I know we did have, I feel like, a consultant talk at the June meeting, but we will continue to push forward in those themes and areas. Do you have anything to add on strategic plan? Okay. I did have on the agenda the IMPO FHWA FTA certification. So when we met in April, so April 1st was tax, so right before policy, which would have been like April 11th and 12th. I don't remember the exact date, it's all a blur. As an MPO, both FTA and FHWA come in and kind of look at how the MPO is doing based on federal regs, bring in specifically our transit partners as well, INDOT in the room, and go through our core projects. So our UPWP, our TIF, our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. I was told or expected based on the timeline that we would have had our certification report by now. So my intent here was to brief you on the findings. They don't have that report. So 3 or 4 months post certification. I will email those out. I hope we have them in between tech and policy. They are about 2 weeks behind schedule. I followed up. We were supposed to get them late last week, early this week. So stay tuned. In my mind, I'm really looking for what corrective actions they found, accolades, corrective actions, accolades, or accommodations, and recommendations are the kind of the 3 categories I focus on, and I'm gonna share those, but they're not available. So just an FYI, I will share those when they are out, but we don't have them yet. Active transportation plan, Jody is going to be kicking off.
Yes.
Active transportation plan. We are looking for steering committee members. Are we gonna send out an email? Is that the intent? So okay, we're gonna follow up with an email. We are looking for folks in your community on staff that are interested or want to contribute your thoughts and opinions to the IMPO's active transportation plan. When I say active, I'm thinking bike and pedestrian. So that project is kicking off soon. We're looking for that steering committee. So heads up and feel free, even it doesn't have to be you. If you have a newer member on staff, somebody that wants to get engaged, love to have new thoughts and opinions and new people at the table. The other thing, and I am going to look at some of you directly, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan consultant selection. I'm looking for a few people outside of the IMPO to help rank score any proposals we get on that RFP. So remember, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan is that document that only contains expansion or capacity projects that help set the vision of the region for that. So if anybody has time or has a younger staff person that you want to get some RFP experience and ranking scoring proposals, we're looking for some additional assistance just outside of our opinion on this stuff. Any other comments, questions? I'm looking staff. Okay. Remember, if you do have staff changes, we need updated letters from your highest elected official, so we can make sure we have all of our documentation and link so they can be made there. Any other questions?
I was just gonna, even though we're following up with an email, but if you have any questions about the selection committee or active transportation after this, let me know.
Reauthorization, September 30th, the transportation bill does expire, and there has been some movement on, but we're expecting continuing resolution. I've been in contact with, Senator Tom Young's office, just making sure, right, that SPDG money continues to flow in that, continuing resolution, obviously, that's our largest pot of funding and our most flexible. So I have been getting more calls, I would say, on the national level with our congressmen, senators, just the reauthorization. The Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations is making sure I am on the phone and making phone calls because we do have a couple of pretty influential R's in the process. So just a FYI. Okay. With no further updates from staff, I do need a motion and a second for adjournment. Okay, what's another name? I'm gonna go with Brad. Yeah, a motion by Renee, a second by Brad, to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, aye. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Nice seeing you.
I'll know that there are 30 years. I just.
I